On today's episode of the podcast, we are joined by Paul Bauer, host of the Come On Man podcast and student of Corey Wayne's book, How to Be a 3% Man. His personal mission in life is to understand women and relationships better so that he can pass along that understanding to men who want to better themselves. His story resonates with me a lot because we come from similar backgrounds with a history of nice guy syndrome and people-pleasing behavior. Paul believes that a lot of people don't understand how relationships work through the polarity between masculine and feminine energy, and we dive into that conversation a lot on today's podcast episode. Paul also believes, and I share a similar opinion, that people learn relationships and those dynamics from their parents and are oftentimes taught through their family systems, limiting beliefs that hold them back in relationships as they become an adult. If his message resonates with you today, please don't hesitate to connect with him on Instagram or on TikTok, and he'll quickly respond to your message. Without further delay, let's get into today's episode with Paul Bauer. Hey everyone, welcome back to the podcast. I'm honored to be joined from Grand Junction, Colorado. Paul Bauer, how are you today, man?
I'm doing good, Dave. Thanks for having me on today.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to join you. We originally got connected on TikTok of all places, and I really appreciated what you were throwing out there about the strength of a relationship with yourself when it comes to being a man out there nowadays, and wanted to just pick your brain on what you're so passionate about. So thanks for joining me.
Yeah, absolutely.
Are you from Grand Junction? We're both in Colorado.
I'm originally from Conifer, actually. Okay. I graduated from Evergreen High School. And I left for the Navy when I was 18, ended up in San Diego for about 15 years, and then moved back to Colorado back in 2013 and ended up on the Western Slope that time.
All right. Yeah, San Diego is one of my favorite towns. What kind of trouble did you find while you were down there?
All of it. I was a young teenager in the Navy, so you can imagine. I spent a lot of time down at Tijuana before I turned 21. So yeah, all the trouble.
Okay, that's good to hear. We found trouble in San Diego when I was 36 on a bachelor party.
Oh, yeah. Okay, probably want to hear about that, but I don't know if it's podcast material.
I might have brought up a couple of the stories. The boys and I were at the Westin Hotel that's attached to PNC Park,
okay,
where the Padres play, and our cocktail server who was serving us on the patio that night was really frustrated with her job. And she's like, I want to get fired tonight, guys. Can you help me get fired?
What?
Yeah. So there's 15 of us on this bachelor party trying to come up with a not so good idea after the ball game. Not so good idea of how to get this girl fired. And a couple of us got this idea to find one of those bird scooters, the electric scooters, and ride it through the lobby of the Westin.
Oh, nice. Yeah. Like a 5-star hotel.
Yeah. How we thought that we were going to get her fired for that is she was going to hold the door and be like our accomplice in the whole thing. So never ended up happening because we walked, 3 or 4 blocks in a circle around that Westin hotel, and we couldn't find one with a charge because it was midnight after a ball game. People have been using them all day. So our plans were dashed, but that was the kind of trouble that we were looking for.
That's kind of mild compared to some of the stuff that happened in the Navy, but
right.
Yeah.
Did you ever go to the horse races while you were there?
Once. Yeah. I worked for a company. Oh man, must have been about 11 or 12 years ago. And the owner of the company used to like to do a day at the races, and he would buy, the box seats and have everything catered and stuff like that. And then he would give each table like $100 to gamble with and stuff like that. It was pretty fun. I only did that once though.
Yeah. Yeah. We did a little bit of gambling at one of the horse tracks up the road, I think north of San Diego. And there was actually a shooting in the crowd that day.
What? At Del Mar?
Yeah. At Del Mar Racetrack. So this would have been 4 years ago. They just celebrated their 4-year anniversary. Mm-hmm. And they would bring in like a musician, and it was Ice Cube that day.
Okay.
And somebody was making trouble, and actually the gunman got shot about 25 yards from us.
That's amazing.
Yeah. Not the kind of trouble we were looking for.
I always, maybe I shouldn't make light of it, but it's kind of funny because, California is very strict on their gun laws. And, like I have a concealed carry permit. It was one of the first things I got when I moved back to Colorado. But when I travel to California, they don't recognize it. So I am disarmed for my own protection, but it doesn't stop stuff like that from happening. It's unfortunate.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. Yeah. It was definitely, it shook up The Bachelor, so we left right after that. We had a friend give us a ride back to the hotel, and we put down a couple of old fashions later on in the evening, just kind of like calm the nerves. And it was an experience that I wouldn't want to go through again.
Yeah. Yeah. No one should have to go through something like that.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Let's get back on track. So I like to ask my guests, how did you hear about the Enneagram originally? And what was your first impression?
Right. Yeah. And we had talked about this. I dated a gal last year for a hot minute. And this was before I really got into, dating and attraction books and stuff like that. And so I didn't know what I was doing, but she was just super into Enneagram. And she was like, that's all she would talk about on the few dates that we went on. And, yeah, she had me take a test, and she's like, you're like an achiever and stuff like that. And I was like, what does that even mean? I don't know what that means. And then she would sit there and compare it to what hers was. I can't remember what hers was. And it was funny. She would send me all this stuff, and I was like, oh yeah, that's fascinating. To me it was almost like one of those disc charts or something, or I don't know, or even like Zodiac, oh, these people mesh better, it was kind of funny. Yeah. But yeah, it was good stuff, but I haven't really gotten too much more into it than that.
Right. That story sounds familiar. I was hanging out with a buddy of mine one night for a happy hour as a business event. And he's like, hey, Dave, when do you have your dates take the Enneagram? Is it before, during, or after the first date? And I mentioned on the phone when we were chatting that, like, I don't want to use that tool to project an idea or all the tendencies that I know about each personality type onto other people. So I'm backing off on that and really using the tool to build connection and to ask curious questions that, it's really great to understand who your partner is at their core. And then also, hey, how are you different from the tendencies that show up for the achiever? Like, are you success driven? Would you say that joining the Navy at 18 was part of that? Like, I want to see the world, or I want to explore. I want to be the best version of myself.
Honestly, the reason why I joined the Navy, and I distinctly remember this day, it's burned into my brain. I was in weight training class in high school, and I was a senior, and I'm on the chest fly machine, and I'm just realizing that life is coming at me fast. Like, I'm going to be graduating in a couple months. I don't want to be living with my parents forever, but I don't really have, I'm not making enough money working at Safeway or wherever I was working at the time to, have my own place. Like, what do I do? How do I pay for college? And, it just popped in my head, your cousins all joined the military. And at that time they were all joining the Air Force, or all my cousins were in the Air Force. So I was like, you know what, I'm going to join the Air Force. And so I decided, like, right then and there, I was going to join the military. And I, talked to my parents about it. I reached out to the Air Force recruiter. He went through all the steps, even sent me to the military entrance processing station there in Denver. And they disqualified me because I told them that I was diagnosed with asthma when I was in like junior high.
Okay. Yeah.
And so they sent me home, and I was crushed. Like, that was my big plan, and my buddies, my high school buddies were all joining the Navy. So they reached out to the Navy recruiter, and he's like, we take anybody, man. Like, we put known crack addicts in the Navy.
Whoa, hey.
Yeah, we could get them in. And so I talked to the Navy recruiter. He had me see one of the Navy's doctors. The Navy doctors cleared me, and the rest was history. I ended up joining the Navy instead. But really, I mean, it was more about trying to figure out, how am I going to pay for college? Because I was raised where my parents said, look, if you don't at least have a bachelor's degree, you're not going to be anything in this world. So I was like, like a robot, I have to get a bachelor's degree. And that was my plan to get there, because my parents didn't have enough money to send me to college, and I certainly didn't have money. So that was the path I chose to take. And
Mm-hmm.
and I eventually did my time in the Navy, got out and did go to college. So
Mm-hmm.
it was a
Right
means
on.
to the end, I guess.
Yeah, that story that they shared with you, as like, if you don't get a bachelor degree, you're not going to be anything. How did that become a part of the drive? Like, did you internalize that story? Did you make it become a part of yourself? How did that influence you?
It did originally, it was a goal that like I had to achieve. I had to get there. And, I ended up doing it. But having gone through college, the funny thing is, before I even graduated college, I got an internship at a company called WebSense. They're no longer called WebSense anymore. I think they're called ForcePoint now. But I got an internship at a company called WebSense before I even had a degree, before I graduated anything. And I started learning on the job how to do, information technology and security and stuff like that. And so during that whole process of working while I was going to college, I realized I didn't really need college to do what I wanted to do. And really, like, I finished up college mainly as just because it was a goal I set for myself. And I wanted to at least say I had a college degree, and I do kind of think college is nice. It does give you sort of a well-rounded education, but it wasn't necessary for what I needed in my career. So, and I know plenty of people that are at the same level of me in my career that have no college.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't tell my kids that, I don't tell them, hey, you have to go to college. I tell them you need to go to college if the career path you want to go into requires it, right? Like my daughter, she wants to be a lawyer. I was like, yeah, you have to go to college for that.
Yeah.
But my son, he just wants to be in video games, and maybe be a video game developer. And I was like, you don't have to go to college for that. You can learn programming and graphic design on your own,
Yeah.
So
Yeah. For me, college gave me options. I felt so limited on options up until 2008 when I was in hotel and restaurant management. And then the industry bottomed out and I really had no options. So back to serving tables, bartending. And I'm like, if this is all that I'm doing professionally right now, might as well fill my days with going back to school, because I've always wanted to check that off the list so that I could have more options than just bartending.
Sure.
And so went back for exercise science. And a secondary goal was to show my daughter, who was 8 at the time, how important it was to accomplish that. Just like, if this is on your list, then go for it. And she's 19 now. So she's got her eyes set on a doctorate in psychology because of how much of an impact her therapist and counselor has had in her life. She wants to impact other lives like that.
Oh, that's really cool. Yeah. Yeah. You definitely have to go to college for that.
Yeah, certainly, to be a clinical forensic psychologist, which is where she's headed. But how old are your kids? I don't think I knew that you had children.
Yeah, I have 2. My son's 12 and my daughter's 16. And my son, he's gonna be 13 here coming up in March. So 2 teenagers in the house. It's gonna be great.
Yeah, you'll have your hands full. And why that's important for me to ask is because of the narrative that you were mentioning. You're not passing on to them that it's necessary to go to college. That sounds like college is an option and you're giving your kids option. Where does that fit into your parenting philosophy?
Yeah, I really I want my kids to be successful in life. And I feel like success is subjective, right? So you can, if you feel happy and fulfilled and you live in a tiny house and you have very little overhead, but you have a lot of freedom, you're successful. It doesn't necessarily mean you're a millionaire to me. So the way I look at it is I just want my kids to be happy and feel successful in their lives. And if they want to be a farmer and do that, great. You don't need a college to be a farmer, Right. So that's the way I look at it.
Yeah, that's a nice approach. Certainly could use more men in my life with that approach when it comes to parenting, I respect that. The differences.
Also too, a lot of people don't realize this either, but a lot of people go to college and they get degrees and they rack up tons of student loan debt. And then they go into some other field that didn't require that degree to begin with. And so really it's just a big waste of money at that point. For a lot of people, not everybody. I mean, you still get a lot of stuff out of college, I think, but it becomes this debt that they didn't need to incur. They could have learned all that stuff with self-education, reading, going to the library, getting some audiobooks or something. So that's really what I'm trying to, put on my kids is, if you don't need to go to college, don't do it. It's not worth the money. Just find something that you really want to learn and self-educate, and then pursue your career. However, get certifications.
Right.
There's other ways of being successful, really.
Yeah, that's a good way to say that. I certainly didn't need a college degree to become a personal trainer, business owner, strength coach. What the college process gave me was a mentor in my academic advisor, who then helped me, guide me towards the right internship. So I interned at the University of Denver in their strength and conditioning department.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, so thanks for sharing a little bit of your background. And we weren't here necessarily to talk about parenting, but it's important. And we'll take it back to TikTok. I shared a video of a person who follows the Men Go Their Own Way movement. And in his video, he's sharing the narrative that goes along with that philosophy. And he mentioned that he was going to show his son and teach his son every principle of that philosophy, so that he can have what his dad now found in his life through that philosophy. And why that rubbed me the wrong way is that it was imprinting or putting another narrative on your children that they may not necessarily want in their lives. So thanks for clarifying what narrative you were teaching your children, that it's an option, not a definitive. What comes up for you when I describe that?
Well, anytime I hear about the MGTOW movement, or the Men Going Their Own Way movement, I just shake my head at it, really. I mean, to me, and I get a lot of heat for this because I put out TikToks all the time where I basically call those guys quitters. I can respect people that don't want to get married, having been married and divorced, like that's a real painful process. But to completely give up on all relationship, I think is sad, and I definitely don't advocate for that. So yeah, to put that on your kids, I feel like, maybe put that as an option, but I feel like to say this is how you need to live your life, like forget women, just focus on yourself and you'll be happy. You'll be much happier. I think that's a lonely way to live and to tell your kids how to live. I think that's kind of sad.
Yeah. Yeah. That's what struck me about it as well. So thanks for sharing that and including me in your ideology there. I agree that it's a way for somebody to avoid what can be confronting, because relationships are incredibly confronting, especially if you want that level of intimacy that I heard you alluding to. Does that resonate?
Right. Yeah, it does. Because I think a lot of those guys they just don't understand the nature and psychology of women, and we talked about this offline, that most men, and if you read How to Be a 3% Man by Corey Wayne, he basically, asserts that 97% of men don't understand women. And I think, having been in that 97%, I agree, and these guys, instead of taking the time to learn what makes women tick, they just give up. And that's just no way to be. No one likes a quitter. So really, if they just took the time to learn that, maybe the way rom-coms portray romance and relationships, and learning that that's not accurate, and, really learning what is accurate, it's really not that hard to learn. And it's a little counterintuitive at first, but once you figure it out, it makes perfect sense. And if you just apply that, you can have happy relationships. But a lot of guys don't want to put the work in.
Yeah, they're definitely avoiding what brings up a lot of anxiety and a lot of fear, and And if we weren't taught, by a male role model, whether that be an uncle or grandfather or our father, if we weren't taught what it's like to be a healthy, masculine, grounded person growing up, then we're going to struggle with that. And we're going to avoid as we get older and into relationships, and when deeper intimacy is at our doorstep. And that's where I really resonate with the nice guy syndrome. And you talk about that a lot. How did you first, discover that you were a nice guy? And then how'd you recover?
I first discovered it because, I was married, I got divorced in 2014, and I floundered on the dating circuit for almost a whole year until I found a woman that she was, let's just say, very forward. And I needed that in my life because I was such a nice guy. I was afraid to make a move. I pedestalized women and I was just like every possible aspect of a nice guy. That was me. And so I really needed her to be assertive and just sort of like go for it. And then I immediately fell in love because I, was so needy at the time. And I ended up staying with her for 4.5 years. And then we broke up in 2019, in the middle of the year. And I found myself back on the dating circuit again. I had a little bit of a better time that time because I was in better shape, but I still had that same mentality of being a nice guy, and I couldn't keep women around. And I just was like, what am I doing wrong here? And so sort of as a New Year's resolution last year in January, I was already listening to audiobooks, because that was a blessing from that relationship, was that woman was really into audiobooks, and she sort of got me even thinking about reading self-help books, because I would have never read them if I didn't meet her. And so I was like, you know what, maybe I'm just going to dive into this and see what I'm doing wrong. And I think one of the first books I read in the space was No More Mr. Nice Guy by Dr. Robert Glover. And he's really just the pioneer of digging into the nice guy syndrome and breaking it down, and just reading everything in that book. I mean, there's some things, if you read that book, a lot of the first half of it is dealing with like childhood trauma and abandonment issues and stuff like that. And I didn't really have any of that, I feel like, growing up. But when you start getting to the latter part of the book, where he starts talking about different things that nice guys do, then all of that resonated. I was like, oh, that was totally me, And honestly, you talked about father figures teaching their sons, how to be. I mean, I learned relationships from my dad. My dad's a total nice guy,
Yeah.
and he and my mom are still together, but they're not happy. My dad, he's always been the guy that says, husbands are like Indians in old Western movies. They never win, he's that guy. But I feel like if he, if he had learned differently, if he learned what I learned in these books, that it's his job as the man to sort of set the tone, take the lead, be assertive, be decisive and stuff like that, he would have had a different outlook. And my mom would have felt better, because she could have relaxed into her feminine a little bit more and let him take the reins in the relationship and stuff like that. But he, in turn, let her take the reins. And that was me my whole life. And so just reading that, I was just sitting there just having a big aha moment the whole time I was listening to that book, where I feel like, a lot of guys read this stuff. A lot of people get into this space too by reading The Rational Male by Rollo Tomassi. And that's like they call it a red pill book. And they read that stuff and they learn about how, like, women's nature and stuff like that. And they just get upset by the whole situation. And they go into like they call it red pill rage. I didn't have any of that. I was just like, wow, I've done this wrong my whole life, and I've got to change this. And I just started reading book after book after that. And some of them I've read multiple times now. I've read How to Be a 3% Man like 18 times. And
right. Yeah.
And it's just, every time I listen to these, because I do a lot of it on audio, I get something new out of it every time. And I've realized that in order to be successful, you have to always want to keep putting that work in too. You can't quit. So I'm basically going to be like the Bob Proctor of reading How to Be a 3% Man. I'm just going to do it for the next 60 years. And for the rest of my life, I'm going to listen to this stuff, because as soon as you stop doing it, you're going to get complacent. You're going to fall back into your old programming. So
yeah, your story resonates a lot. My dad had this saying of like, well, I'm not going to fight with your mom anymore because she's always going to win. Well, what kind of masculinity is that teaching me growing up? And yeah, my dad wasn't raised with Audible. You know, he also had his own childhood stuff that I'm learning more about now. That we have a pretty good relationship. And the five characteristics of a nice guy that I took away from No More Mr. Nice Guy: they have a tendency to seek approval from others. Guys try to hide their perceived flaws and mistakes, which I'm guilty of. They put other people's needs and wants before their own. Yeah, guilty. They sacrifice their personal power and often play the role of a victim. And then lastly, my big takeaway is they tend to disconnect from other men and from their own masculine energy. And what I heard in your share is that you took ownership over how you were doing things that didn't feel natural to you for so long. And then you redirected on your own with a little bit of encouragement from a previous partner who, I don't know if she was like pushing these books onto you, or she was just setting the example of like, this is what I'm passionate about. It sounds like she was taking lead in that area of the relationship, but it also inspired you to make a change after you lost the relationship.
Yeah, she never pushed it on me. She was never like, hey, you should listen to this, you should do this. I was always the guy that if I was reading a book, it was a novel, you know, and I just noticed that she was doing it all the time. She was listening. She had her boss, which I feel like she had a really good mentor in her boss, and her boss made everyone in their company read, I can't remember the name of the book. Oh, Hardwiring Excellence. That's the name of the book. Cause it's, she manages a medical office, and Hardwiring Excellence is all about management in the medical field. And she makes them read and reread that book every year. And they all sit around, basically have this book club. And I was just like, that's insane. Haven't you, why would you read books more than once? But still, like, she would do that. And then she would also listen to these other books, like the Never Split the Difference, and, stuff on negotiations and stuff like that. And the first book that she had me listen to was Total Money Makeover by Dave Ramsey. And when I listened to that book, that was a life-changing book. I was like, oh my God, I've done finances wrong my whole life, and immediately started changing things like that. So I think she never told me you have to do this, or, really pushed it on me. She would suggest it and just otherwise just do it herself and not worry about what I was doing. And I just sort of ran with it, because I just thought, man, this is a great idea. And then, listening to audiobooks while you're driving or at the gym or whatever, it's just effortless learning. And like, why wouldn't you want to do something like that? So yeah, I look at that, that relationship failed, but I try to look at what were the blessings from that. And that was definitely one of them.
Yeah, it sounds like she approached the communication in the relationship a lot like I would now, after learning, like yourself, on my own. What was I doing wrong? What can I do differently to be more, happier in my overall life? And relationships contribute a lot to our happiness or lack thereof. And what I heard she was doing was inviting you and including you. And that's a great relationship tool. Hey, this is what I'm doing this weekend. Are you interested in coming? Do you have any interest in that? Or this is what I'm reading. Would you want to join me? And then we can discuss it along the way. Is that what it felt like? Is that something that you've taken on in your own personal life?
I would say, I would say she wasn't the best communicator, but yeah, that was definitely an example of doing that. In my personal life, what I actually do more instead of inviting, like my current girlfriend, I don't invite her to do things with me necessarily. I follow, this is another book by Dr. Robert Glover, but Dating Essentials for Men. He talks about setting the tone and taking the lead in the relationship and basically being decisive and making the plans, right? So what I do now, instead of inviting my girlfriend to do things, I'll ask her, hey, do you have any plans Saturday? And, or do you have any plans this weekend or whatever? And she'll say no, because she never does. And
you said she works nights, right? That might be part of it.
Yeah. She doesn't have a whole lot of plans because she works nights. So I was like, what are you doing?
Not because
Saturday?
she doesn't have things in her life.
Right.
Right.
When she doesn't have her kids, I should say, because she's a single mom. So,
Got it.
So yeah, Saturday, what are you doing? Nothing. Okay. We're going to go here and do this. And I just tell her like that. And I got that from Dr. Robert Glover's book, where he says, like, don't ask, tell. And she just responds really well to that. And honestly, I found that a lot of women respond very well to that. And it was shocking to me, because I always felt like if I just tell her to do something like that, that sounds controlling. Like, that was my nice guy mentality. But realizing that a lot of women like men to be decisive and make plans like that, like a lot of women are just receptive to that. They're just like, oh, he made a plan, let's do it. And most women are just cool to come along. And so that's what I do. I don't invite, I tell, like, this is what we're doing. But I just take the extra step of actually making a plan,
Right. Yeah. What I hear a difference between the two scenarios is, like, making plans is one thing. And I'll use another Dr. Glover reference here. Giving or telling somebody to read another book is called first order change. This is something that Dr. Glover talks about. First order change. It's not as well received by a male friend, a female friend, a partner, a parent, a daughter, whatever. But second order change is more of that invitation and inclusion when it comes to personal growth. Like, that's a completely different topic than what I hear you describing when it comes to the first date, right?
Yeah.
I'm all about leadership on the first date. I'll share an example from a couple of years ago. Match with somebody on an app, get to know each other, the talking stage, whatever. And it comes down to, like, hey, let's grab coffee this Saturday. How about 10 o'clock? And she's like, that works great. Okay, well, you live in this part of town. Here's 2 coffee shops. And gave options, right? Oh, it doesn't matter to me. Just pick one. Okay, all right. Well, meet me here at 10 o'clock on a Saturday. And I'll use Dr. Glover in this scenario because in Dating Essentials for Men, he says, take the lead, but be flexible on how the person responds to you. Because that's where you said either, I think controlling was the word that you used.
Yeah.
When you're inflexible after you give that leadership moment, that's when it becomes controlling.
Yeah,
but, like,
I agree.
oh yeah, we give out 2 options for coffee shops. I've given you the day and the time. Here's 2 coffee shops that I like. Yeah.
There's a really great example. And I've done, I don't know, 100 TikToks on this already. There's a really great example in Atomic Attraction where, the age old issue of where do you want to eat, honey?
Yeah.
And he gives the perfect scenario for that. And I've never had a problem following this since I read that. But instead of saying, hey, where do you want to eat, honey? Don't ask her, you tell her, so you think of, like, what do you want to eat for dinner? And let's say steak, right? You say, honey, I feel like steak tonight. We're going out.
Yeah.
Now 9 times out of 10, she'll say, yeah, that sounds great. But if she doesn't, if she says, well, I don't want steak, then you say, well, do you have a better suggestion? And if she does, great, go with her suggestion. There's no reason to not be inflexible, like you said.
Yeah. Yeah.
But if she's like, well, I don't know what I want, then you say, well, I'm having steak. You're welcome to join me. But the funny thing is, I've never gotten to the point where I've had a girlfriend say, well, I don't want that. I've always said, hey, let's go to this place tonight. And they've always just said, yeah, that sounds good. And it's just like, it's been life-changing for me. Cause I've always been that, well, where do you want to go? Well, I don't know. Where do you want to go? And it's frustrating for men, but it doesn't have to be if you just pick a place. So I don't know. It's kind of interesting, but yeah, like, there's no reason to not be inflexible or not be flexible, I should say.
Yeah, that's what I hear you saying. I also hear you saying that the decisiveness is a big part of leadership in a relationship. You being decisive about, hey, I want steak tonight. And I also heard you invite them along, like, hey, I'm going to include you. I want you to be there with me.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the big thing. Yeah. I'm going to have steak tonight. Good luck with whatever you're having. Yeah. That doesn't make any sense. So
Yeah. I think a callback to the men go their own way would be like, well, I want steak tonight. You don't want it? Okay, I'm going.
Mhm.
And it's just like, okay, well, you piecing out on your partner. And something that I've learned along the way, even more recently, from a friend of Dr. Glover's, G.S. Youngblood. He was a guest on the podcast, wrote a book called The Masculine in Relationship. And he says that behavior from a man who's like, well, I'm going to do me, that makes a feminine person feel dropped. Like, you just let me down.
Yeah.
Because I wasn't included, not in the planning of the event or the date or the trip or vacation or your life direction. It's not because they weren't included in the plans. It was because that person shared their plans with them and said, I don't really care if you come or not.
Right.
And that's not respectful. It's not kind. It's not loving. It's none of the things that bring us to a deeper level of intimacy in a relationship.
Right. And I think a lot of that is that concept is missing in the red pill community, because a lot of the red pill guys, I mean, if you read the actual red pill books, right, by guys like Rollo Tomasi, they talk about stuff like that. It's not just about being this alpha male and doing what you want to do. You do have to take into consideration your partner, right? And but a lot of red pill guys don't hear any of that, and they just think, oh, I'm just going to be a jerk and do my own thing, and somehow women are going to respond to that, and if they don't, I don't care. And that's just no way to live life. I think, just as a human being. And whereas books like Dr. Glover's and like Corey Wayne's are much more of, it's more well-rounded, where they tell you how to be a dominant masculine male, but also give to your partner, because relationships are about giving to each other at the end of the day. If that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense to me. Let's dig into that term dominant that you said, that you used there. In my language, I would probably choose grounded, centered, assured, assertive, decisive masculine.
Sure.
Let's expand on that just a little bit more. Now that I bring that up, what comes up for you?
Yeah, I would agree with that. I feel like, a lot of people hear the word dominant and they think, what's it called?
S&M? Is that where you're going?
50 Shades of Gray,
Oh.
or something like that. And like,
Okay.
and
All right.
there's, but if you think about it, 50 Shades of Gray sold 100 billion copies for a reason. And that's, I feel like, not necessarily because women are into like the whips and chains and stuff like that. Some are, but it's more because they do like men to take that leadership role. And those types of qualities, being assertive, decisive, and stuff like that, are all traits of a leader, a masculine leader. So yeah, that's what I mean by dominant. Yeah.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying there. The one thing about 50 Shades of Gray that works, right, is they're entering into a contract. It's a written contract, because there's a lot of things that the main character, I think Christian Grey is his name, that he wants to protect. And most of that is his finances, right? His image and his projected view from other people, and then his income and his lifestyle as well. So why I bring up the contract that they get into is it's related to nice guy syndrome, where there's covert contracts. How did you see these binding covert contracts that are all unspoken show up in your life that actually took away from the relationship experience for you?
Yeah. A great example is that gal that I dated for 4.5 years. Every month I would buy her flowers and send them to her work, trying to get those brownie points, I was like, if I send them to her work, like, her coworkers are going to get jealous and it's going to make me look good. And at the end of the day, I'm going to get sex, like, but she was just like, oh, flowers again, this is nice,
Uh-huh.
but really at the end of the relationship, it meant nothing. And, I felt like, oh, but I did all this for you. But really I was doing it all so that she would give back to me somehow.
Mhm.
But we
Give
never
to
talked
get,
about
right? Yeah.
Right, right. And that's classic nice guy stuff. And I realized that doing all that stuff, like buying flowers and, while it may seem nice, that's not necessarily what women respond to. And you don't have to do that. And it was a gigantic waste of money over
Mhm.
4.5 years.
It sounds
And
predictable as well. Like there's no
right,
mystery. There's no, oh, well, we have a routine. It's
right.
Thursday. It's the last Thursday of the month. Am I going to get flowers? I'm probably going to get flowers today. Yeah,
Yep.
I can understand how somebody wouldn't respond to that predictability
Yep.
and lack of mystery, lack of excitement. How do you keep things? How would you? I know that your relationship's pretty fresh since April, right?
Correct.
How would you go about keeping things exciting now that you've kind of grown personally over the last few years?
Well, one thing is I don't put my current girlfriend on a pedestal. I mean, one thing that I've learned from Dr. Glover is that women don't necessarily want to be on pedestals. So I don't do that. I don't over text her all the time. In fact, I'm really scarce when it comes to texting and stuff in between seeing each other. If she texts me, I usually reply back, or if I haven't heard from her in a couple of days, which has never happened.
Right.
But like I'll be the one that reaches out occasionally. But
Mm-hmm.
really, the big thing that I try to do now is keep dating her. I don't want it to be where, oh, well, let's just hang out and watch Netflix tonight and chill all the time.
Yeah.
I try to keep things fresh and plan dates and actually come up with new stuff every time, and just try to keep things fresh that way, as
Mm-hmm.
opposed to being predictable and, buying flowers all the time. And try to switch things up, keep her
Right.
guessing.
Yeah, I can understand that completely. And the same goes for um, uh, taking the lead 100% of the time, right? We don't need to do that in order to create this safe and secure and exciting environment for ourselves and our partners. Like the restaurant the restaurant leadership example that we've been talking about is like, we don't have to do that every single time we go out to dinner. It's just a redirection when things are getting like, are we becoming more friends than we are lovers?
Mhm.
That's something that can incite some excitement from the masculine to the feminine poles.
Yeah, I agree with that. In fact, since I've been so decisive in planning dates and stuff like that, one thing that I found is that she feels like she needs to step up her game and occasionally plan stuff. So she will try to beat me to the punch now and try to plan dates. And when she does that, I just let her do it. I'm like, oh
Mm,
yeah, it sounds great. Let's do it.
yeah.
um,
Yeah. In a competitive way or in like in a partnership kind of a way.
in a partnership way. Yeah. She does it, I feel like, because she feels like she doesn't want to have to let me be the one that's making all the plans all the time. And so
Mm-hmm.
she wants to step up and try, basically put in effort too. In fact, she's put in more effort than any woman I've ever dated. It's pretty spectacular. But yeah, she'll do stuff like that, or she'll offer to cook for me, and stuff like that. And then it's just a matter of, she'll give me two choices. What do you want? And then I just,
Mm-hmm.
let's
Pick
go with
one.
this. Yeah.
Pick one. Yeah. It sounds like she's responding to your intentionality and your personal choices that you're making.
Yeah. Yeah. I would say so.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's jump back to text messages before I let you go for the day. Dr. Glover talks about early on in dating, texting only for logistical purposes.
Mhm.
Is that what you're describing when like you're scarce on text messages?
Yeah. Yeah. And I got that from his book. And I also got that from Corey Wayne's book too. And I used to be the annoying text all day guy.
Good morning. The good morning text every day.
I used to be the good morning, good night text guy, texting all throughout the day. Well, I just went to the gym, had a good workout. What did you do? What are you up to? Just all throughout the day. And I found especially near the end of my, that last long-term relationship, that she just wasn't responding very much anymore. And she used to text me all day too, and she just stopped doing that. Right. And I just sit there and continuously text all day.
Right.
and until she would finally reply at the end of the workday or something like that.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Just an annoying,
Mm-hmm.
texter. And so when I learned from Corey Wayne and Dr. Glover that, texting and phone calls should be for logistics and to save conversation for when you're in person, I was just like, this is amazing. And I do find that if one thing I do like about Dr. Glover's stuff though, is that he basically says, keep it to a minimum. He, like, Corey Wayne's basically like, no texting. And I feel like that doesn't work very well. Women do like a little bit of correspondence here and there, but as long as you're not getting too in depth in texts and conversations, then you can save that for in person, and then you have more connection when you're in person. And it just works out better that way.
Right. Yeah. What comes up for me when you describe that, not scarcity, not inflexibility when it comes to text messaging, what I hear is just a really grounded approach to communication.
Yeah.
And yes, what I've found over time is you may be able to ask at the end of the day, hey, how was your day? And that goes so much further than the good morning text, the good night text. And then just like the flowers you were describing once a month becomes mundane and expected and almost like, well, that's a little stale. That's a little vanilla, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I've done several TikToks on don't be good morning text guy.
Yeah.
And I say, look, she might appreciate it in the beginning, the consistency, but eventually she's going to get bored with it. Eventually, it might not be a year from now. It might be 5 years from now, but she's going to get bored with it, and you're going to get predictable, and she's not going to like it. So you should always be doing what you've done from the beginning, I feel like. So don't get in the habit of doing that in the beginning.
Right.
And it won't be an issue.
Right. Yeah. I totally understand that. Like, nice guys have a tendency to behave this certain way, like we've been describing today, for so long. And then when they finally discover that they've lost their identity and they've lost their purpose and their direction in life, and their partner is doing all the leading, and then they come across maybe a men's group or this book or a new mission in life, a new grounded purpose in his life, then they flip to the other end of the spectrum, and it's almost like culture shock within the relationship.
Yeah.
And that's
how I lost Enneagram girl, because
tell me more about that. I've got it.
Yeah, because right when I met her is when I started reading like Atomic Attraction. And so maybe after like the third date, I just cold turkey quit texting her all the time. Like, like needy text guy that I was, I just stopped. And I just remember like 2 days went by and she sent me this nasty text. Like, I'm really taken aback by the fact that you're not texting me and stuff, and she felt like she was being rejected. But in reality, I was just trying to be a better dater. But that's what I realized. You can't go from being over texter to immediately not texting.
Right.
That doesn't
work. Then it becomes
either.
An integrity issue.
Right.
And why it comes to integrity for me is because we can absorb this knowledge from guys like Corey Wayne and Dr. Robert Glover. And when we do it for the wrong reasons, that's when it becomes an integrity issue. What you were describing there and what came up for me is immediately like, you stopped texting because Corey Wayne recommended it, right?
Well, it was an Atomic Attraction, but yeah.
Atomic Attraction.
Yeah.
Whereas if you suddenly just stop texting because you're on a work trip, or because you got a new job, or because you put a new fitness routine into your life in the morning and you don't text at night anymore, those are different scenarios where, like, I'm not playing a game about text rules. I just made a change in my lifestyle that, hey, I got to get up at 6 a.m. 3 days a week because I hired a personal trainer. That's totally different than the story that I heard you describing.
Yeah, definitely. Because I feel like if it was a life change like that, I would communicate that, hey, I'm not going to be able to text, anymore early because I got to start getting up or whatever. But yeah, no, that's not what I did at all. In fact, I didn't want her to know that I was reading these books and stuff. But I eventually told her that, because I was like, well, no, I'm not. And then Mr. Nice Guy tried to justify what I was doing. Yeah. I was like, no, I'm just trying to be a better dater and
Yeah.
this book. And she was just
Right.
like, you're a loser, you know? So
Yeah. Yeah. I'll close out our conversation on that note of Dr. Glover recommends that we steer clear of the DEAR acronym, DEER. Defend, excuse, explain, and rationalize our behavior. And I heard you kind of rationalizing your behavior to the feminine in that story, and that dissolves a lot of safety, security, and intentionality in our relationship structure. Would you?
It really does, yeah.
And we learn from it. It's not like we go back to the old ways. We're just like, oh, okay, well, I know what's best for me now. I'm just going to take a different approach and be mindful of, oh, am I defending my actions? Am I explaining or excusing my behavior, or am I rationalizing it anyway? It's actually a really good internal check-in system of like, who am I today? Am I defending my behavior, and why?
Right. It really is. Atomic Attraction touches on it as well too. He basically talks about how you shouldn't apologize all the time, especially for things that are out of your control. And I was always oh, I'm so sorry. I'm sorry. You know, my daughter does that all the time. She's like, oh, I'm so sorry. And I'm like, you need to stop apologizing for everything.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to teach her that now. Yeah.
Yeah. If we tend to over apologize and excuse our behavior or other people's behavior, it waters down when the true apology is necessary.
Right. Yeah. I agree.
Yeah. So as we close out today, what would you like? What's a big takeaway that you'd like to leave our audience with?
I would say I highly recommend reading these books that we talked about, especially for men. You know, No More Mr. Nice Guy is a life-changing book. I highly recommend reading it.
And for women too, I'd totally recommend that they support their partner in understanding what's been going on in their world and where it comes from. It can really inspire a lot of deep connection and intimate conversation.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
for sure.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Paul. If people want to get a hold of you and your message resonates with them, what's the best way for them to do that?
I would say follow me on TikTok. I'm at Come On Man Pod. You can also find me on Instagram. I'm at Come On Man Podcast. Or you can find my podcast, the Come On Man Podcast, at anywhere that you listen to podcasts. Yeah.
Is that now like come on with me in a connotation, or is it come on, man?
It's come on, man. Yeah, it comes from Corey Wayne, because the whole podcast is really designed as fellow students of Corey Wayne's book, right? So he always says in his videos, if you watch him on YouTube, he's always, when guys mess up, he's like, come on, man. So I named it the Come On Man Podcast because we're all students of Corey Wayne's book.
Awesome, man. Yeah, that clarifies things for me. And thanks once again. Really enjoyed the conversation, and let's check in with each other in a few months, see where you're at.
Yeah, sounds good.
Awesome. I hope you enjoyed today's episode as much as I did, everyone. I want to thank Paul Bauer again for joining me on today's podcast episode to discuss nice guy syndrome, masculine and feminine energy dynamics, and some relationship dating tips for men to use as they get back out there post-divorce or post-relationship ending. If you're looking for a little more support in your relationship, life, and career right now, please don't hesitate to reach out at Dave M. Glazer on Instagram to connect with me. Ask me anything, and I'll respond to your messages there. Until next week, this is Dave Glazer in Denver, Colorado, wishing you health and happiness wherever you're at in the world.